Hello guys, just want to make a video here. This is going to cover and condense a lot of the information as far as 3D safer barrier. I've got several videos up there, and it's been brought to my attention by a couple people that those videos are a little bit broken and the process doesn't seem continuous, I guess, through those videos. So I want to go through the entire process in one video. This video is going to be a little bit longer than I normally do, but it's going to condense all that information into one video, so it's hopefully easier to find for you in the future. I'll try to mark a lot of the timestamps if I can, where the information is in this video, so hopefully that'll help you as well. The other thing I wanted to mention was this 3D Safer Barrier process is free to use in the community. This is meant to hopefully make it the standard for NASCAR 2003 tracks. And I will also mention that this process will work for other games as well if you're trying to make a stock car track for another game. A lot of the 3ds Max process in this video is going to be the same. Obviously the conversion process is going to be different for every other simulator, but this will cover how to get this into NASCAR 2003 season. And like I said, hopefully it becomes the standard base process anyways. You guys are more than welcome to improve upon it and make your own adjustments to it. And if you know an easier way, to speed things up. That's kind of why I'm making this video as well, is because some of the things that I've covered in previous videos are now obsolete. There's newer, easier ways to get the same thing done. So I wanted to get all that information into one video and update the process. So let's go ahead and get started here. I've got 3ds Max open. Obviously, the first part for NASCAR 2003 is we need an object that is repeatable, a foam block object. And first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about some measurements so we know. This is a guide from NASCAR for the steel and foam energy reduction barrier. Gives some measurements here and guidelines. This is what's handed out to the racetracks and the companies that build these walls for the racetracks. The steel section itself is made up of 5 individual tubes that are 8-inch by 8-inch steel tubes. For our process, it doesn't matter, but the steel is 3/16 of an inch thick. Those steel tubes are 28 feet long. This is something that I wanted to touch on a little bit here, is the height of that steel wall is 40 inches tall, whether it's at Daytona, Charlotte, Texas, Phoenix, Darlington. That steel wall is 40 inches tall. The only exception I've seen, I think, is some road courses, maybe Watkins Glen, where it had an extra piece welded on top, so it was 6 pieces. Obviously, those would be 48 inches tall. But I've seen that numerous different groups for NASCAR 2003 have made these walls, based on photographs, trying to replicate the height of that wall based on a photograph. No, that wall is 40 inches tall. If you're in meters, that's 1.02 meters, which is the closest metric measurement that Sandbox will allow you to input. 1.02 meters tall. And it should be 0.20 inches thick for the wall, for the steel wall. That's the closest measurement to 8 inches that you can get. Yes. 0.21 is actually 8¼ inch, so it's a little bit too big. 0.20 is the measurement that you'll use for the width in meters in Sandbox, and 1.02 is the height of that steel wall. There is one exception to that, and I think we'll run into that issue with the track that I'm going to show in this demonstration, and I'll get more into that when we get to that, because I don't want to throw too much out there without you having a visual reference here on screen. So the foam block object itself is going to be 30 inches deep 22 inches wide back here, and I'll go over what we did here in our object. This is a simplified version of what you see there. The foam itself is actually a set of square blocks here that start tapering down to a point here. Because of how many foam blocks are in an average racetrack, let's say Darlington is one that we just worked on recently. It was almost 1,200 foam blocks around the outside wall. So if you take however many polygons you have in that object and multiply that by 1,200, that's going to have an impact. You can add as much detail to this object as you want. Just remember it's going to be repeated, 1,000 times plus, depending on the size of the racetrack. And I'll show you exactly how many it is at Bristol, which is the track we're going to work on today. Like I said, this is simplified, and I'll go over some of the measurements just so you can recreate something like this. The measurement back here is going to be 22 inches wide. The measurement up here is going to be about 8.5 inches wide. And we decided to keep it simpler by not having that square and having basically twice as many polygons in the object. Right now I've got it reduced down to 5. You'll notice that it is hollow on this face, the bottom, and what would be the back as well. Those faces are not ever going to be seen, so there's no reason to have anything there taking up extra memory or extra resources. Remember, it's repeated over 1,000 times in most tracks. The height, what we decided on was to make it 36 inches tall, which is in meters is 0.919 meters tall. The texture itself is just 15 repeating foam blocks. We've got the banding on the side that keeps it together. In this case, it's painted black. You can paint it whatever color you want. You can have little bits of the original pink showing through if you want to. And I'll get into a little bit how you can create kind of a random pattern with that. This is the texture here, and I'll turn the wireframe on. Zoom in a little bit so you can see. It's just a little bit over 15, but there's 15 full foam blocks there on the texture. The shading layer, we've improved that quite a bit since the original version. This was the original version of the shading. This is the current version of the shading. This is AO baked, and you can actually see the shadow lines from where the steel wall is. The shadows from the steel wall at this end, the shadow from the concrete wall at this end. So you can get some pretty interesting things there. I'm not going to cover how to make that in this video. I've covered AO baking in other videos, and I'll leave that topic for the other videos. So the other thing you want to do is have all the faces removed that are not going to be visible behind the steel wall. You want to have the object set up in this scene with your pivot point at 0, 0. You want the object to be basically the back of the foam block. You want it to be centered left and right on 0, 0. So the x-axis, the pivot point is in the center of the object, but it's at the back here. It's also at the very bottom. So if I go to the rotate tool, you can see that it's going to pivot around that pivot point at the very back and at the very bottom. It's very important that you have that set up correctly in this part of the scene. Otherwise, there's nothing else in this scene, just that single foam block with the pivot point set back there. I've talked about working with the pivot tool. I'm going to assume you know how to use the pivot tool and how to get that pivot point back there. Check my channel for working with pivots. Alright, so that'll cover everything that we need to cover in there. What you're going to do is you're going to export that as a 3ds file. And I've already got one set up under my tools folder, and I've just named it Styroblock Corrected Mapping. We had a mapping issue where one side of the block was facing the wrong direction on the previous version. So I just named it Corrected Mapping, so I know that's the one that I need to import. I'm not going to go ahead and export it because I've already got that done, but it's exactly what you're looking at here. What I'm going to do is reset the 3ds Max here. Go ahead and minimize this. Next thing we need to talk about is getting your PTF ready. There's a few things in here that you'll need to do in order to get your PTF ready to import into 3D SimEd 3. So you're looking at a version of Bristol that is rebuilt from scratch. This is not a showcase for this track, so I'm not going to go into detail here too much on the track itself, but it's very, very early work in progress. Basically, I just want to show you this process here in this track because the walls are pretty much where they need to be. So let's talk about at what stage do you want to do the 3D safer barrier. If you're building a track from scratch, you want to have your banking complete, you want to have your outside wall exactly where it is, the track is drivable, it's raceable. You're happy with where the concrete wall is going to be, because if you make any changes to the PTF, everything that you've done past this point is going to be wrong. If you're working on an existing track and you're adding 3D safer barrier to it, same thing. If you're going to make any changes to where that concrete wall is, you need to make them before you start the entire process, because everything that you do past that is going to be wrong. Okay, so let's talk about getting the track ready for the import process. Now, the first thing you'll notice is I have a pink wall. Usually when you're working with NASCAR 2003, pink means that you've screwed something up, because you're not supposed to be able to see this. What I've done is applied a texture to the outside retaining wall, to the left face, and I'll go over the W section properties here in just a second. But that texture is only on that face for a reason, and I'll show you that here in just a few seconds. You'll see the same texture, however it's got a different name applied to this inside wall. And I'll go over why that's important here in a few minutes. But like I said, I want that entire outside wall on the left hand side to be a texture that is named completely different and completely visible from everything else. Just so we can go over, I've got the outside retaining wall selected there. And you can see here I've just named it awallpink.mip. Let's get that over just a minute here. Okay, so I've got the left side of that wall selected, and it's got its own texture applied to it. I'll mention it here. What that does is it makes selecting those polygons and those faces easier after you've exported it, if it's got its own texture ID. And we'll go through that here. I'm not trying to get too far ahead there, I just want to make sure that you understand why that's important. I've got the same texture, but it's renamed. If we go over to the pit road wall here, that is on the right side of the wall. I've got it named AWall Pink Inside. So it's the same texture, I've just got it applied, as a different file name, so I can select it as a different poly ID number. You'll notice there's no steel walls anywhere in this track right here. This PTF, I don't want the steel walls in place. Really doesn't make much difference because of the way we're doing this, but I want the steel wall not in place in this PTF. It's a good idea to do this in a separate PTF. This is going to be a throwaway. It's just simply for this importing process, nothing else. You're going to do all your work in your normal PTF. It's generally a good idea anyways, but I've got it named no steel walls.ptf, so it helps me identify it. The other thing is, with the pink walls, it's easier for me to, when I open this, to go, oh, this is the wrong PTF, I need to get rid of this one, this is not the one that I'm working in. As far as actually doing work in Sandbox. So. The other thing you want to be careful of, and a good reason to save it as a separate PTF, is you can, if your track PTF has a bunch of wall logos and stuff already in place, you can use the copy properties forward function in the W section properties window to copy that all the way around the racetrack so you don't have to manually apply it. But remember, that's going to erase everything that's already existing there. Building a new track, that doesn't make any difference to me because I don't have any wall logos or anything specific in place. But because the wall logos would get overwritten, so that's why you want to make sure that the PTF is saved in a different PTF. So we've got that already saved. I'm going to go ahead and close this without saving it. Next thing we do, after we've got that PTF ready to go as a separate PTF, I'm going to open 3D SimEd 3. And let's go over some settings in 3D SimEd 3. What I just did was hit File up here at the top. Let's go over the import options and talk a little bit about this and why it's important. The import options are going to set your geometry resolution. And there's a couple of things where that will get you into trouble. And this is something that we just recently ran into and found the solution for. You want to make your settings match this right here for NASCAR 2003. Specifically this bottom section here. You're going to make sure you're only importing high detail geometry. Your PTF longitudinal and lateral resolution, and your PTF arc resolution. Let's talk about what these numbers mean and what I know them to mean. According to Dave Noonan, the maker of this program, on the pits.us forums, he's basically saying the lower the number, the higher the resolution is going to be. However, your hardware is going to be limited to what it's able to draw. And, I've got a pretty stout computer with 32 gigabytes of RAM. And the maximum number, the lowest number, the highest resolution that I was able to, get imported without any issues was 10, 10, and 1. So the arc resolution is 1, longitudinal is 10. I think the default's 25 and 10 or something like that. The two that make the biggest difference as far as what we're doing is the longitudinal resolution and the arc resolution. So make sure that those settings are set correctly before you import your PTF. So we're going to go to File, Import. And I want to import the PTF in that list that says no steel walls, just so I can identify it easier. You're going to get this warning asking if you want to load the objects. I've only got a couple objects in it anyways. I've had not so great results by importing all the objects. We'll go over when that's important when we do the Boolean cutting process for the infield or inside wall there. So in this case we're going to hit no. And you can see we imported the correct one because it has the pink walls on it. You can also see there are no objects present in this scene. So now we're going to go up here to Export. We're going to go to Plugin Export. And I'm just going to save it on the desktop. You'll get a warning here. The only box that I have checked is Export All Texture Coordinate Channels. And that is important in this case. So it exported a .da file. You can see over here on the desktop. Alright, so we're done in SimEd for right now. It's going to ask you, do you want to close? I'm going to click yes. Let's go over to 3ds Max. I'm going to reset, make sure it's reset. When I import that DA, I'll select it on the desktop there, and I'm going to import it. And I'll kind of pause here on the settings screens just so you can go through and make sure your settings match this. I haven't changed anything. This is Max 2013, if that makes any difference to you. You're going to get a warning about the blend is converted to a falling material. That's fine. I'm just going to click OK. And I'm going to maximize the perspective viewport. I'm going to change to orthographic just because it's easier to work with. I'm also going to hit G on the keyboard to turn the grid off. I'm going to bring up the material editor window just by hitting M. And apologize if you can hear the lawnmower in the background. My neighbor's mowing the grass. Nothing I can do about that. So I'm just going to hit the eyedropper on the pick material from object. And that's on the material editor. And I'm just going to click on anywhere on the racetrack. And what that's going to do is it's going to load all of the texture assignments for me. And you can see here you've got the material IDs and the material subnames. These material subnames are still named .mip. Obviously 3ds Max can't handle .mip files. It can't display them in Windows. It's just not possible. What you can do is you can manually go through and change all of your MIP files in your TrackMap folder to .bmp files. And you can go through and reassign every one of those manually if you want to make a scene out of this, or make it easier to work with. Really doesn't make any difference in this case. The information that I need is displayed here without doing anything. You've got a wall pink, and what you basically want to go look for is the two wall names and get the material IDs. Now what we're going to do is we're going to convert that to editable poly by right-clicking on the object and convert to editable poly. We're going to go down to the polygon rollout, and let's see, where's it at? We're going to scroll down to polygon material IDs. I've moved this up in the list so it may be in a different place for you. But I know that the first set that I'm going to do is AWOL pink, which is material ID number 3. So I'm going to go in that drop down list under polygon material IDs. I'm going to select number 3. If you notice in the scene there, it selects all the wall polygons for you. So that right there eliminates a lot of work in the previous videos. With those polygons selected, I'm going to hit detach, which is under edit geometry. And make sure you're able to see that. I want to detach it to an object, so I'm not going to check any of these boxes here. Now that's detached from that geometry as a separate object. I go back to the object mode. I close the material editor. In this case, I'm just going to hide the scene, or hide the track itself. And now you can see that we have just the outside wall, or the left face of the outside wall selected. Next thing that I want to do is convert that to editable poly. I want to go into vertex selection. Oops. And I want to drag select and make sure I have all those vertices selected. In this case, I've got 1,576 vertices selected. What I want to do is scroll down under Edit Vertices. I'm going to click Weld. If I scroll back up, it's now 788 vertices selected. So what I've done is I've basically attached all those vertices together. I'm just going to rotate around here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on Border, and I'm going to click on any one of the bottom edges, and it's going to select the entire ring of bottom edges there for me. Because I've welded all those verts together, I can now click Border and it'll select the entire bottom edge of that for me. So again, that's eliminated a lot of the work as far as manually picking out all those bottom edges. So now when I go up to Edge, all of those edges are still selected. Now I can go down and under Edit Edges, I can click on Create Shape from Selection. I'm not going to change the name or anything. I'm just going to do Shape Type, Smooth. I'm going to click on that button. Now I'm going to go back to Objects, so I'm going to hide the wall. And now what I've got is a shape very easily created from the bottom edges of that wall. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to save the scene. I'm just going to save it in my Bristol folder. 3D foam starting scene. You can name it whatever you want, whatever works for you. And I'm just going to save that as a scene there. Also what I need to do is import that foam block. So I'm going to go to my tools folder where it's stored as a 3DS. That's the one we exported earlier. I'm going to merge the objects, so I'm not going to convert the units. So now that you can see that we have that one block inside that scene, we need to apply the texture to it. So what I'm going to do is go to a different material up here just by clicking any one of these here. It really doesn't matter at this point because we're going to reapply it. Because of the workflow that I use, I'm working with two different versions of Max 13 and Max 7. All of my exporting process is going to be done in Max 7. All of my working is done in Max 13. If you're more comfortable doing this in Max 7, or I'm not positive that all of this will work in Max 7. I know it works in Max 13. That's why I do all this stuff in Max 13 and then get the objects into pass files in Max 7. So what I'm going to do is apply the texture there, which again I've got over here. Just going to go ahead and apply that and click on Show Shaded Material in Viewport. I want that to be done to this object because after I do the spacing tool, all of the remaining objects will have to be manually assigned, but if you assign it before you do that, then everything is already assigned for you. Alright, so we've got the foam block in there. I'm going to go ahead and save the scene again, just so I have something to go back to. At this point, the only thing I've got visible is that shape and that block in the middle. I'm going to apply a different color to this here. Again, I'm going to use the kind of a pink color, just because it stands out against the white. So I've got the foam block selected, and we'll go ahead and save the scene there. I'm going to go to Tools up here next to Edit. I'm going to go to Align Spacing Tool, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to check the box next to Spacing. General rule of thumb here is 2 meters apart. We're going to use spacing only. So I'm going to uncheck the box that says count because I don't care how many there are. I want the spacing to be consistent at 2 meters. I'm going to say context centers and follow. And I'm going to make it type of object copy rather than instance, because I don't want what happens here to affect anything else, and I don't want what happens to each individual block to have any effect on any of the other ones. So I've got my spacing set. I've got centers, follow, copy, and it says pick path or pick 2 points. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here and click pick path. I'm going to click anywhere on that shape, and what you'll see is a bunch of those blocks get added to that shape. Now I'm not sure if that's correct because I'm too far zoomed out, but I'm going to click apply. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in. You can see that the foam block is facing the wrong direction. So what I'm going to do is zoom back out. I'm just hitting Control Z to undo. Go back to that previous step before I've selected it. Spacing, let's see, Align Spacing Tool. Make sure all my settings are still the same, which they are. Actually, I'm sorry, before I do that, I'm going to zoom back into the original block here. So I'm back at the original point. What I need to do is rotate that block around. So I've got the block in the center of the scene. I'm going to turn on the angle snap tool. I'm going to rotate that one in the center around 180 degrees. So now that block is facing the other direction. So now I'm going to go back to move there, select and move. Align, spacing tool. All of those settings are the same as before. When I click pick path, apply, close that. Now if I zoom in on one of those, the blocks are facing the right direction towards the infield. That spacing tool works by applying the object. Let's go over a few things there. How is that block, or each one of these blocks, aligned to that? That's why the pivot point, it basically aligns the pivot point to that shape there. So why is that important? And, you know, a couple issues. If we zoom over here to, say, the middle of the corner, let's zoom over here. If I unhide the entire object here, or the entire scene, let's go ahead and do just the wall. Simply because it's easier to see. There you got a little bit more contrast. You notice they're all facing the correct direction. They're not rotated, or they're not banked with the banking of that wall. So unfortunately that part is still done manually, but up to this point we've sped up the process considerably. A few things to go over as far as the spacing. In this scene I'm going to work with just 16 of these blocks at random, so I'm just going to drag select 16 of these. I'm sorry, 33 of these, not 16, 33. So I'm just holding control to add. I just need 2 more. That is the set of objects that we're going to work with in this scene. Normally what you're going to do is you're going to pick any point, usually start finish line if you know where it's at, or someplace on the straightaway. You're going to start there. Honestly, it really doesn't make any difference where you start. Let me do a couple of these and then I'll get back into why we're breaking it down. Let me undo. Okay. Let's just start right here. So I'm going to zoom in on that. I need to manually rotate this. Typically, when you're doing a track that has foam blocks all the way around it, what you're going to do is, at this point, basically just eyeball every one of these and make sure that the spacing looks correct. That spacing tool is really good, but occasionally you'll have some instances where you know, the spacing might be just a little bit off. It may be too close. There may be too many blocks in one area. Hopefully that happened here so I can show you what I'm talking about. But I just want to make sure that that looks consistent. Typically, you know, you might have an issue where the beginning of that sequence starts. Don't really see any issues in this one. Actually, yes, here, right here. So in this case, it's really the only issue that we ended up having. Let's see, what's the best way to fix that? In this case, what I'm going to do is, since they're too close together, I'm going to delete one. I'm going to go to local up here. That changes the working pivot or visual pivot to a little bit closely match, you know, the local pivot of each one of those objects. So you can kind of see what I'm doing is just spacing out all the ones around where I took the one out. To kind of fix that issue. You can also use snaps. I'll go over that here because I know I've done that in a previous video. You may be working in the center of the corner where your issue is. Turn off angle snap. I'll turn on that. I believe it is snap to edge toggle. Now what I can do is I can take that block, and this works anywhere on that segment as well, in the corners or however you want to do it. I've done some videos talking about snaps and different things. This is basically exactly the same. I've used the snaps toggle at the top, and I've used snap to edge segment toggle. And you can see that as long as that line's green, it will basically stay aligned to that spline. So I can move it anywhere I want using that, or I can use the local and just do it freehand without the snaps toggle. I think that's enough information on that. I've got the other videos available. Like I said, they might go into a little bit more depth than what I'm doing here. But that's how to fix spacing issues. That's something that you want to do at that stage, is fix all of your spacing issues if you have any. Like I said, in this case, we're just kind of going through the basics of it. I'm going to work in the center of the corner because I believe that's where you're going to see most of the issues. What we need to do is manually rotate that. And I've covered that part in the video as well. I think I've got 2 different videos on how to rotate that foam block. Obviously, freehand is not really an option. It doesn't work. There's nothing that's going to work out in your favor in that case. But if I change that pivot to local, it's now going to rotate on that pivot point. So now I can get a lot better precision. Go ahead and zoom in here. I want that top edge to clip into the wall just a little bit. And you talk about, well, how do you get, you know, how many, well, let's see how many foam blocks are in this scene here. Let's go ahead and hide that. Hide that. How many foam blocks is this for Bristol? That's 445 objects that you're going to have to manually rotate. How can I get that workload done as quickly as possible? I have not found an automatic way to do it yet. Still searching every day. I've learned different ways of doing this kind of stuff. How do I get through this amount of... And Bristol's a small track. So, you know, I've done Daytona and Talladega both. And I think it was over almost 4,000 objects just in Daytona and Talladega alone. Done manually. Exactly like I'm showing you right here. This is the quickest way that I've found to do it. So let's start with 360. So unhide all, unhide or hide the track just because it's easier to see. Again, making sure I'm on local. I'll start on block number 360 here. I want it to clip into the wall just a little bit. What I'm doing is, this is the part that's going to get you through it. Is I'm hitting Z to zoom to the next one, clicking on the next one, Z to zoom. Make sure I've got the right axis selected there. Z to zoom. And we're probably not going to be able to get this done quickly enough, so I'm just going to have to do a couple here, and that'll be what we need to do. Just want to do enough to where we can get a visual representation. Again, just making sure that the next object is visible as you're going around the corner. It's going to be a little bit harder to see, so I'm going to hit Z to zoom, Control R to rotate around that, and then I'm going to move the camera and adjust it a little bit so the next one's visible and the next one's visible. As you work around the track, you're going to have to keep adjusting the camera so you can see the next one. For this example, this is what we're going to do. Just the ones that I've done here. Typically, you would want 33 foam block objects, and each one of these is a separate object. You're going to want 33 of those blocks into one object when you export it. It's typically the maximum number of polygons that you can have in a single object. And we'll go over the Boolean cutting process. When you cut the object using the steel wall for an angled wall, it's going to increase the number of polygons in the object. So keeping the number at 33 typically works out pretty well. Like I said, I'm not going to go through this entire thing here. Just want you to see the process and the results and some of the issues that you're going to run into. I'm going to go ahead and save the scene again. So I've got the ones that I've rotated selected. I'm going to go to Hammer, Collapse, Collapse Selected. That's now collapsed into a single object. So I'm going to convert that back to Editable Poly. Go up here to the Hierarchy tab, Effect Pivot Only, center to that object. And now what I need to do is go to the Select and Move tool. I'm going to open Notepad, or you can write it down on a napkin, whatever you prefer. We're going to call this object, just for this example, let's see, styro block underscore example A. Let's do underscore A. Styro block example A. So we're going to put that information into there. We're going to go X space, Y space, Z space. Now what I'm going to do is go back to View. So that was a mistake I just ran into right there. I've still got local selected. What I need to do is go to World and copy the X, Y, and Z. So that's a good thing that's in there, because that's something that I might skip over and you might not understand in the scene that you're working in. I was still in the local view. So that's a good question. Does that have any effect on Effect Pivot Center to Object? No, it does not. Okay. That's fine. Just want to make sure. So when I'm copying this information, I need that from the World pivot, which is 0, 0, 0 centered there. So I'm going to copy the X, Y, and Z. So the X is 165. The Y is negative 23. And the Z is 9. Okay. So I'm going to take that. I'm going to save that as a TXT file on the desktop, just in case I close it, lose it, whatever. I'm going to move that off screen there. What I'm going to do is unhide all. I'm going to save the scene. I'm going to hide the selection there. Select everything else, delete it all, unhide all. Now the only thing that's in that scene is that styro block. What I need to do is, before I save it, I'm going to move it over to the center, so I'm right clicking. So now I've got that. If I turn on the grid, you can see it's at the center of the world now. It's sunken into the ground. I'm not worried about that. I've got the X, Y, and Z already written down where it was in the world, and that's the measurements that are, or the information that I'm going to input into Sandbox. So now what I want to do is save this as a separate scene. And I also want to export it as a 3ds file, using the same naming conventions all the way across here. Ignoring that warning, because we're going to reassign the texture in 3ds Max 7. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close that. I have a bunch of warning messages on 3ds Max 7, just letting you know. If you've got your setup properly, you shouldn't have all these warnings. All I'm doing is just skipping all these warnings. So now what I'm going to do is import that 3ds. I'm going to completely replace the current scene. I'm not going to convert the units because it's already set up correctly. I'll retry on that error. Notice that the naming conventions did get messed up. So I'm going to go ahead and change that, make sure that the object name is named correctly. And I'm going to apply my styrofoam texture. Make sure that's visible. I'm going to sign it there. So now we've got, all that set up correctly. I'm going to go ahead and save this as its own scene. This part of the process, you don't necessarily have to do it this way, but this is the way that I found works best. If I have an issue, I can go back to this max and this scene and fix any issues that I have. So I've got it saved as a scene. Now I'm going to export it as a .pas file. I've got videos on how to set that up if you don't have that set up in your Macs. I'm going to export that onto the desktop. And I've got that set up. Alright, so everything's good there. Now what I'm going to do is go to my computer, and I've got a folder set up here. Let me remove, actually I'm going to leave that, this. This is how I've got my folder set up for Make 3DO. So I want to import my styro block. This is the one we just exported from Max 7. In this folder I've also got my texture. I'm going to go to Start, and under Search I'm going to just type CMD and hit Enter. That will bring up the command prompt. Now in my case, what I'm going to do is navigate to that folder. So I'm going to go change directory / change directory / make 3DO. And now you can see why I've got that folder on the C drive. It's easier to type, basically. So I'm going to go make 3DO. I'm going to go -P. I'm going to go styro _block _example _a.pas. And when I hit enter, you'll notice that that spits out a 3DO file for me up here in the folder. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that. I'm going to go over to my tracks folder. This is my working folder. And Bristol 2016, this is going to be in the main folder. And I don't believe I have the texture set up in there. I'm going to go ahead and close the command prompt for now. And do I have the texture as a map? I believe I do. Okay. So we'll go ahead and copy that over as well. If you want to verify, you can open 3ds mode, make sure that there's no pink lines or anything. So go ahead and close that. Close all this. Now what we can do is we can go in Sandbox. We can go in our regular PTF that does not have any of the modifications for exporting. In this scene, or in this PTF, let's see. Okay, we'll go ahead and zoom in. Go to Object View, right click. We're going to add that styro block example. And I'm going to copy what was on the notepad into the object properties. I'm going to go to Fixed. I'm going to go to X, Y, and Z. You can see that's placed it in pretty much the correct area there. Oops, sorry, I clicked the wrong button there. Let's go ahead and zoom in here on the camera view. And you can see that we've got some issue there. I will tell you that what you see in Sandbox may not be what you see in game. And I've also got the wrong texture there as well. What you need to do at this point is go into the game and verify that you've got the important thing that you want to look at there is the alignment of the blocks compared to the lower part of the wall. The higher the banking that you have in your track PTF, the more issue that you're going to have with the wall not being drawn correctly. And I want to make sure I cover that because you're going to have issues at Bristol, Daytona, a lot of the higher bank tracks. I've also got this concrete wall set too low to begin with, so that's part of the issue. You're going to have to do some adjustments with your wall heights in the corner because it's just not drawing it correctly, and I don't know if I can visually show you exactly what's going on. The height between here and here is not exactly what you set it to. The outside of that wall is either going to be way too tall or way too short. There's really nothing that you can do about it. You're going to have to adjust it visually, but at this point, before you make your adjustments in Sandbox, you need to go into game and verify that what you're seeing here is what you actually have in game. Quite frankly, what you have here makes no difference. It's what you see in game that's important. I can tell that this process worked based on the fact that the back bottom corner is following the base of the wall. That's the important part. As far as left and right alignment, the rotation, all that kind of stuff. The adjustments that I'm going to do are to the concrete wall and the steel wall. The steel wall was never set right to begin with in this particular PTF. I had it pulled away a little bit away from where it needs to be just to make sure that I'm not clipping through it and all that kind of stuff. But like I say, the adjustments that you're going to be making are going to be in your geometry, and this is kind of a bad example because it ended up in the middle of a segment here, so it'd be kind of difficult. You're going to want to, obviously you're going to have all the other blocks done. You're going to want to align your steel wall at the end of the segment. Don't worry about the middle, because believe it or not, Sandbox is not drawing the wall correctly. The game is not going to draw it correctly, but the game is going to draw it probably 10 times better than what Sandbox is going to. Don't know why, that's just the way they made the program. Has to do with the fact that the geometry is floating and that the resolution changes. In a game where you're driving on a mesh that's directly exported from 3ds Max, then you're not going to have these issues because it's going to be aligned exactly to the wall that you have in 3ds Max. Unfortunately, that's not the case with Sandbox. You're just going to have to do some adjustments, and it's not going to be exactly perfect. This is the example that I was talking about earlier, where the steel wall, it may end up having to be taller than 1.02 simply because those objects are the correct height, but the game may not, or the Sandbox in the game may not draw that wall correctly. Nothing you can do about it. That's just the way they made the program. It's a floating resolution. The resolution of the geometry changes. The resolution of your objects do not change. So you're going to have to adjust the constraints that you're limited to, basically. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to save the object, or save the PTF, and overwrite the original. Like I said, I want to go in game and verify that I've got the same result. So let's go ahead and make sure that I've got this one deleted. And Bristol 2016, copy that over. Alright, let's go ahead and open the game here. I'm also going to open CamHack. Let me... Sorry about that. Alright, maybe we, you know what, I don't need the controller for that, that's fine. We'll just use CamHack to get over there to it. Not sure why that happened, to be honest, but anyways. So we'll just use the CamHack to get over there. And of course the speed is too slow. Let me turn the speed up. Sorry about that. So, like I say, this is the reason why it's important. You can see that it is actually much closer to what we were looking at in 3ds Max versus Sandbox. In Sandbox, you know, that wall, the height of the wall is going to have to be adjusted. That's fine. But the rotation of the block is very close to what we had, you know, as far as being rotated into the wall just a little bit. This is totally fine. There's nothing wrong with what you're looking at here. This is exactly the way it should be. Pardon me. So this is totally livable. What I think I'm going to do, because this video is running a little bit long, I'm going to do the boolean cutting process for not a full safer barrier section in another video, just because this video is running a lot longer than I intended it to do. So yeah, I'm going to leave this video here, but understand that what you looked at in Sandbox and what you look at here in game is not exactly the same. If you start freaking out because it doesn't look right in Sandbox, check it in game before you make any changes. Make your adjustments based on what you see in game, not what you see in Sandbox. What you see in 3ds Max and what you see in game should be a lot closer. So make your adjustments based on that information. Obviously the height of the wall has to go up a little bit. That will also bring this edge of the wall up here a little bit. That will take away some of the over rotation into the wall that you have. Like I say, when you're moving your steel wall, line up your ends of your segment in Sandbox. That's generally going to be the parts that aren't floating, is where the control points are at the end of the segment. And then check the effects of that in game as well. So hopefully that covers a lot of the information in a lot more concise manner. Gets you there a lot quicker as far as selecting that wall face and getting that edge selected faster. Yeah, I think I'm going to close this video here because, like I said, it's getting a lot longer than I expected it to. So I believe that covers everything I need to in this video. Look for part 2 of this, which will cover the boolean cutting process in a little bit more detail based on what we've already covered in this video. Apologize that I couldn't get it all into one, but it's just too long, so I'm going to stop it here. Other than that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys soon.